Hi everybody, this is Joseph Sharon and I'm back again with another movie review. I just recently watched Power of the Dog. And for those of you who aren't aware about the movie or the book it was based on, it's a story that's set in 1925 Montana during the Depression, or the middle of the Depression. And you have these two ranch hands. You have George and Phil. Phil is the more astute or scholarly of the bunch, and he idolizes this man named Bronco Henry. And of course, there are some insinuations made about Bronco Henry. We never see him because, unfortunately, in the movie, he's already passed. And he has a memorial for him in the in the stables. There's a saddle there, and his spurs, and a rope, and it says, in loving memory of Bronco Henry, friend. But I think with what's implied, especially with a certain scene in the film, that Bronco Henry probably was more than a friend, because it's subtle. It's very subtle, but it's actually quite overt as to what Phil thought of Bronco Henry. This film doesn't quite go down the same route as Brokeback does, but there are some little nods to Brokeback. Now, I love the film for its allegory, its metaphor, use of symbolism, and I thought that was all brilliant. I thought that Benedict Cumberbatch played a very imposing, miserable character that turns a new chapter in his life when he meets Peter, the son. Of course, the mother does too. And it's a different kind of film, but it wasn't for me, even though I adore Westerns. It didn't go anywhere, and there were a lot of questions that the film left lingering, and I'm sorry that this has a lot of spoilers, but this is my criticism of it. It didn't really lag for me. I thought it kept you well engaged enough for you to be interested in what was happening, even though a whole lot of nothing happened. I'd like to read the book because I hear that the book is so much better than the film. And the title itself, I thought it was taken from the fact that Bronco Henry was known as El Lupo, and Phil refers to himself as Romulus. And of course, his brother is Remus. And if you know anything about mythology, you realize that Romulus was the stronger of the two boys that was suckled by a wolf mother. And his strength, in turn, fortified Rome, or created Rome after him. That's how Rome was born, according to their lore. But it's interesting because in the end, it's not Romulus who is the one who is victorious in this, and instead it's Remus. And I guess that's one turn, and then another turn is Phil's death. Sorry, spoiler, because he sees it's kind of foreshadowing in the very beginning of the movie when they're going through Big Sky Country and driving the cattle out, and then there's a cow they found that was dead, and one of the ranch hands says, "What's wrong with that cow?" And another one says, "It's sick." Well, what happened? Anthrax. So they don't touch it because anthrax can spread to humans and kill them. Anthrax is very deadly, and he would never touch an animal that had that. So it's interesting what Phil actually does later on in the film, because Phil himself is a very intriguing character. He's effeminate, and I didn't think that he was out homosexual. I just thought that he was an effeminate character that the cowhands, the ranch hands, jeered at, and they ostracized him due to that, and he made flowers. Just because somebody likes to make paper flowers doesn't instantaneously make them gay. I'm sorry. But I think at the time it was just, a macho man's world. The ranch hands, they're tough, they're weathered, they are very straightforwardly one way, black and white. So I think it was interesting that you have a character who wears white, who is a little bit different from the others, and the mother, of course, you know, is interesting because I'm thinking, I mean, there's something I inferred, maybe I shouldn't have, but Phil tells, not Phil, Peter, excuse me, Peter, the son, tells Phil, and I'm sorry I was getting this wrong, he tells Phil that when he found his dad, after his dad had committed suicide, that he found him and cut him down. And I thought, maybe you were the reason why, and maybe, because at the very beginning, he says, and maybe I'm being too far-fetched, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but at the very beginning of the movie, he says, what kind of man would I be if I didn't protect my mother? So it kind of leads you to believe that Peter is not the young man we think he is. He's not all sweetness and light. He's not innocent, even though he wears white, which is a direct contrast of his character. So, I mean, it does a lot of interesting things. I can see why it won awards. I can see, I love the cinematography in this because it's beautiful. And you just see nothing but vastness and nothing but free space and blue skies for miles, even though it was filmed in New Zealand. But The Power of the Dog, the title, can come from either Bronco Henry being Il Lupo, the dog being Phil himself, which a lot of people are interpreting that as what it is, or the fact that it comes from that psalm, Save Me from the Power of the Dog. It's a psalm of David, and he was entreating God to save him from his enemies. One of many that David wrote to entreat God to save him from his enemies. But it wasn't God, it was Peter himself that took initiative to kill Phil. So you kind of wonder what's going on. Something's not quite right with Peter, obviously, but like I said, I give the movie 1 thumb up because, not 2, because like I said, there's so many things that were left undiscussed and undiscovered, and it just kind of left it without a conclusion, which I hate. I mean, I hate it when a movie is left without a conclusion. This could have been easily a series instead of a movie, which, they could have explored the characters a little bit more, and it would have been more interesting, but they just left it as is, and I didn't care for that. It kind of went down the pathway of, are they perhaps homosexual for each other, which would be really, really, really disturbing, because the implications were there. I mean, with Peter giving Phil the cigarette, yeah, that was overt. And I'm not saying, it's a bad thing. It just kind of irritates me when this pathway is taken. And I mean, I don't mind if characters are. I mean, if it's well established that it is a character who is, then I'm like with the Owl House, I'm fine with this. I don't see anything wrong with it. With Steven Universe, I had no complaint. But when it's just, you believe in one thing, and it's not established at the very beginning that this character is perhaps gay, yeah, then I get a little bit irritated. Plus, like I said, the ending leaves a lot to be desired, and I might be the only person who feels this way, but I don't know if I even like this movie, honestly, because, I mean, I enjoyed it because it told a really good story, one that's intriguing, one about the West, which I find fascinating. And the thing I took away from it was you can't trust anybody in the Old West. Well, of course, that's, obvious with a lot of different films. They take upon the same kind of takeaway. The other takeaway that I understood from the movie is the West was difficult. And that was accurate. But I think 2 movies that do this I should say 3 films that do this far better than Power of the Dog ever could would be Open Range. Of course, a few others, but that's all I have to say for now for Live on Brussels by 2D.